vicino, lontano, near and far. In this next category, I grouped all those appointments that were specifically regarding local issues. So not so much our relationship with the rest of the world, but specifically the internal problems, okay? And here are present three local dimensions: the Italian one as a nation, the Friulan one as a region, and the city one as Udine. Starting with the national issues of demographic crisis. It's a huge issue, national issue in the last few years. The talk Inverno Demografico has discussed about it. The title would be in English, Demographic Winter, an Unavoidable Destiny. Connected with this topic is the topic of another talk titled, Who Will Inhabit Italy After Us? I'm not going to say anything else about this. The titles are pretty much self-explanatory. Let's move to the city of Udine now. There was a photographic exhibition that was put in place by a researcher, an architecture researcher of the University of Udine, the PhD Alberto Cervesato. And this exhibition wanted to imagine the future of certain neighborhoods of Udine, especially the title is Il futuro dei borghi urbani udinesi. Borghi urbani. The concept of borgo is not translatable in English. It would be kind of neighborhood, but borgo is something else and more than neighborhood, because it's almost like a self-sustaining town that doesn't have a municipality, so it's usually very small. It's a group of houses that could be both in a city or in a rural area. We call this borgo, and it has a 1,000-year-old history in Italy, this urban reality. Basically, there are certain borghi, certain neighborhoods that are neither in the historical city center of Udine nor in the rural areas outside of Udine, so in the countryside. They're kind of in the middle, and they have been abandoned for the past few decades. So this project is a project that tries to reinvent these areas to, at the same time, make them appealing for a new way of inhabiting the city, but also maintains their original characteristic of being a hybrid between the city culture and the rural culture. An interesting talk was titled Rigenerazione Urbana, so urban regeneration. And here the guests discussed how to protect our cities from the aggressions of the real estate market. So a very hot topic, even here in America. This has been discussed a lot, is being discussed a lot. This was made from a point of view of middle-sized Italian cities. And the question was, can middle-sized Italian cities be sort of a good example of positive practices towards this urban regeneration and protection, also protection from degradation coming from these dynamics of the free market. Of course, topic of this discussion was also what we call edilizia sociale, social real estate. I would say, I feel like there is a proper expression in English that I'm not able to remember right now. I looked for it earlier, but I couldn't find it. I don't know if it's public housing. Public housing is more specific though. It's basically just the concept of providing a guaranteed and safe housing for middle income people who cannot afford the prices of the market. So the city of Vienna, Wien in Austria, is probably the greatest example in the West of this. And then there has been an appointment to talk about how the jail of Udine, the prison of Udine, has been transformed architecturally, but also socially. So if you remember, if you followed my Vicino Lontano report of last year, one of the talks that I reported was about the problems of the jails in Italy. And the number one problem is that there are too many people per space available. So the cells are overcrowded, and with all the consequential problems that come from this. So this talk was to update citizens about the transformations that have been taking place in the jail of Udine. There was the architect was present, the coordinator of the jail was present, and they have been talking about how they are solving overcrowding issues and how they are making jails a more livable place. Let's keep on the topic of architecture, but more architecture towards greener alternatives. It's not what you think. It's nothing scientific. There were two talks, or two appointments, let's say, about this. One was a conversation on inhabiting. This is the title translated in English, Conversazione sull'abitare. It was a conversation between an architect and an anthropologist, and they have been discussing the necessity of a new paradigm of building, of architecture, that includes social justice and environmental justice, and takes into account our fundamental need as humans to live in contact with what we call nature. Another appointment was not a discussion, but rather a tour, a guided tour of the parks of Udine. It was called Quattro passi nel verde della città, which means 4 steps, a walk in the green of the city. It was an architect of Udine who guided us through a few parks or gardens in the historical city center of Udine, and explaining their origin, the concept behind them, and their role inside the fabric of the city. Last two appointments were more specific to the reality of Friuli as a region. One was about the city of Gorizia. So in Friuli there are 4 cities with each one a province. Udine is the biggest one by far. Then we have Pordenone. Then we have Trieste, which is probably the most famous one. Trieste is still nowadays, although it's a bit in decay, a very important European harbor, and it's been sort of attached to the region, to the administrative region of Friuli because we are so close to them after the Second World War, but there are huge controversies about this. And the 4th city is Gorizia, which is sort of between the provinces of Trieste and Udine. And it's quite small, and it's a city that is laid right at the border between Italy and Slovenia. In fact, Gorizia is the part of the city that is the most historical one, and it's inside the Italian border, but there is a whole part of the city that has been developing after the Second World War that is called Nova Gorica, which in Slovenian means New Gorizia. And therefore, this city is quite particular, is a city of the border, and this talk has been discussing the features of this particular case. The other talk about Friulanity has been about the history of the Friulan language. And of course, I like this very much. You know, I have a sort of a passion. I speak Friulan language, and I'm particularly affectionate to it. The two guests, the two people speaking, were the president of the regional agency for the Friulan language, William Cisilino, and a professor from a university in the Lombardy region. So he has nothing to do with Friuli, except that he knows perfectly well the Friulan literature and Friulan language, even if it's not Friulan at all, which is very strange for us Friulans to have someone from outside of our region that knows our language. He has been studying Friulan literature, and that's why he was there. These two have been making kind of a dialogue during a couple of hours where they have been telling the history of Friulan language in the past 1,000 years, and with references to the literature, especially to Friulan poetry. And I'm actually going to make a separate video about this, so if you're interested in this topic, in the Friulan language, you can watch that one.